Morning. Just a second here. Let me square this camera up a little bit. All right, today we're going to talk about turning a bowl with clean cuts and no tool marks. One thing I see happening with a lot of younger turners or newer turners is they're not using their tools to the best of their ability. So we are going to work on making some cuts so that we can produce clean sides and a clean interior on our bowl with no torn grain. This is a piece of spalted box elder. However, this is kind of special in a way. This box elder came from the American golf course in Greensboro. And so it has some very unique mineralization due to the fertilizers and things that they use on the golf course. So it's really pretty wood, but it's a bit different in coloration than what you would expect from box elder. I am going to remove the bark, first of all, because this is going to be the bottom of the bowl, so I can't keep it anyway. And the person that I bought all these blanks from lived on the golf course. He rescued the tree. He prepared bowl blanks from the remains, and he set them all up so that they would be turned from the outside in, and then he stopped turning. So I got a large collection of already dried blanks. These have been drying indoors for more than 5 years. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between cutting dried wood and green wood as well. And one thing I can tell you is green wood cuts easier and cleaner than dry wood. If you can turn a clean cut on a bowl with dry wood, then you're doing better than a large percentage of wood turners if you can get clean cuts with no torn grain. It's more difficult to do on dried wood, but we'll be demonstrating some of those techniques here in a few minutes. And again, it's just safer to remove this bark because it will catch the gouge and just come flying off in one big chunk, which is fine. I wear my face shield, but if you know that the bark isn't going to stay, the smartest thing to do is remove the bark ahead of time so that you don't have that flying shrapnel as you work on your bowl. So a couple of things to talk about. First of all, this is mounted on a woodworm screw. And that is a 5/16 hole drilled in the center. And then it's a screw with very wide teeth, I guess. And it's designed to hold a bowl blank. A lot of turners have had bad experiences with woodworm screws and don't like them. Mounting a bowl with a woodworm screw is 100% about the quality of the wood. If your wood is heavily spalted, has a lot of rot in it, it's not usually a good idea. The screw will just rip out of the wood. So make sure you understand the quality of the wood you got. Like I said, this is very dry. It's good solid wood. I've turned multiple bowls out of this stock, and I know that the woodworm screw will hold it safely. Other methods you can use, you can drill a hole large enough to open your chuck inside, like a mortise. You can use a faceplate. You can use a sacrifice block, but this surface has to be perfectly flat, which it is not. And the one thing that really holds this bowl here so that I can turn the outside of it is not the screw, but the pressure that the screw creates as I tighten it down between the surface of the wood and the top of the chuck jaws, the shoulder of the chuck jaws. And when I pull this off on the other side, I'll show you that that's actually created a flat spot in there, and that friction is what holds this blank more so than the screw. When you're starting, it is always smart to bring your tailstock up. This gives you two things. First of all, it keeps your bowl between centers, which is a lot of good support, which is important. And the other thing is it gives you a center point that you can identify when you reverse the bowl and then when you finish the bowl. So this bowl, like I said, is dry. The blank elongated as it dried, and it was not cut equally. So you want to start your lathe out slow. This is not balanced very well, so you want to slowly bring it up and find a speed where it'll turn and it's not rocking and rolling. So at this stage, I'm not recommending a speed. What I'm telling you is if you do that method, if you slowly bring it up to speed, focus. If you slowly bring it up to speed, you'll find a balance. And in this case, with this bowl, it's about 750 RPM. So we'll get ready to go here. First thing we need to do, set the tailstock. Make sure that the bowl clears. You see it's hitting. So the first thing you want to do is get your tailstock in there, spin it by hand, and make sure it clears. It's not exactly perfect, so we need to make sure that we have that, or that tool rest, not tailstock, tool rest. We want to make sure we have that tool rest clear, and if you just turn the lathe on and it's not clear, it's going to go like that and cause issues. So make sure that it's clear. Make sure everything's nice and firm, and we're going to go ahead, take a sip of coffee, because it's almost cold. It's cold. Big failure. And get the face shield, and we're going to go ahead and start. And the first thing we're going to do is get these corners off. That's actually sharp. There's a sharp point right there. There's a feature in the wood. But these corners need to start coming down so that we can start shaping this into a bowl. So hang on a second here. So there are some keys to having good, clean cuts when you make a bowl. And the first and most important factor in having a good surface off of the tool is making sure that that tool is sharp. All right, let's see if we can focus. So the sharper the tool, the better off you are. Now that is something new and different. I'm not used to that not focusing. Okay, so what we're doing is just knocking these edges off. And the cut we're using, the gouge is pretty much open, meaning this is open, this is closed. It's pretty much open, about 50 degrees. Okay, so what this is doing is just catching and it's tearing, and you can see really rough torn grain here. In fact, I can just pull flakes of grain off of there, okay? Right now what we're doing, we're roughing, is we are just removing material to get that so that it's round. We want to keep our tool rest about an inch away from the tool. That gives us plenty of room for the blade to rest out over the edge of the tool. This is box elder. This is box elder from the National Golf Club in Greensboro. Okay, so we're going to close the flute a little bit more. We're at about 45 degrees. And we're just going to very gently, starting about 4/5 of the way out toward the edge, just start wrapping that around and getting our rough bowl shape. We don't need to come in straight from the side and get it round. We can remove the corners. We can start to shape it from out here, and as we come around, we will start to get a bowl shape. And one thing you'll notice I'm doing is taking steps. What that allows me to do is set up a ridge. I'm turning a lot of air here, but I'm setting up a ridge where the heel of the tool can rest as the blade is cutting, and I'm moving that down around. I don't want to take too big of chunks out of the wood, so by setting up steps, I can lower the width of the pieces I'm taking out of the wood, make them a little bit smaller, but still have it as supported cut, meaning that the tool is supported on the tool rest. Again, we're at about 750 RPM. And as you can see, as I start working around, I come back and pick up that step, and as I start working around, I start shaping the unround part of the sides of the bowl into round. Another thing that's important to note, wow, why is that not focusing? Another thing that's important to note is I'm not looking at where my tool is cutting. I'm looking over here at what the tool has removed. Watching that, what the tool has removed. Don't watch where you're cutting. You can't see anything. You got wood chips flying at your face. Watch what the tool has removed. Why are we working like that? This camera is really not being focus, okay? So don't look here, look at the shadow. Some people set a white sheet up behind their lathe, something white, so that they could have a good high contrast focus. Focus. And you can do that, but you learn to watch for the shadow. And again, as we work the shape round, start bringing this bowl shape into focus, we also are taking the sides down and getting it into actual round. You want to make sure you don't take too big of bites, because you can actually, and I'll do it on purpose, bog down and stop your lathe. Not good for your belt, okay? Don't do that. No, this is about 8 inches across. So our goal here is that there will be no tear out, no torn grain, and no tool marks on our bowl. The number one, the first thing that we need in order to achieve that is a sharp tool. Morning, Scott. So, sharp tool is number one importance. Now that we've just about got it round, we can start moving our tool rest over, start working our way in that direction. You still see I have that high spot where it wasn't cut perfectly round on the bandsaw. Again, not by me, not that I would necessarily get it perfectly round either. So at this point, we start working on getting this more true to round so that we can take the speed up a little bit. So if you go over to Turning Gnome's page and do a little scrolling, sometime around the middle of last year, he did a video about the rule of nines. For those of you who are mathematically minded, essentially what the rule of nines is that you reduce the speed of the lathe by a factor of 9 for every, I don't remember if it's a reduction or a multiplication, but basically you want to set your speed around, base your speed around the size of the bowl. The bigger the bowl, the lower the speed you're going to turn. Now, about an 8-inch bowl, 9-inch bowl, you can get into the 1,000 RPM range. Right now that it's balanced, I'm up to 975. That's not a recommendation, so that you turn at the speed that you feel comfortable and safe turning at. But once you get the bowl into balance, again, the less distance across the bowl is, these are about 8 inches, the higher speed you can achieve. If this was a 3-inch bowl, we'd be rolling at 1,500 RPM. And that does help you get better cuts. But when you have a larger bowl, you're dealing with different levels of torque, and that can actually get you in trouble. You don't want to be running a 12-inch or a 14-inch bowl at 1,500 RPM. You will not be able to control it. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's doing that. It has something to do with TikTok. That has something to do with the TikTok interface. I don't know. I don't know how to. I don't know what's going on here. Hang on. Let's see if that helps. So we're just about round. I've got a little bit of a flat spot right here. A little bit of an odd spot here. But you can see already, you can start to see the grain, the spalting. There's an inclusion right here. That's the pith. That's all going to have to be turned out. So probably down to about here. But what we want to focus on is the quality of our cuts as we come around. There's some bug damage. That's cool. But what we want to do is start focusing on the quality of our cuts. This is still very rough. We need to start smoothing that out and getting clean cuts. So to that end, the first thing, again, the most important step, make sure your gouge is sharp. I'm going to put this on the grinder real quick. I use a Robert Sorby Pro Edge. It's actually a belt system. Use whatever you prefer. I actually am going to get a CBN wheel or CBR wheel or whatever they're called. I'm going to get a wheel sharpener. I'm going to have the option of both, but that's what I have. All right, so now we're going to start again. Hey, Chris, good morning. We're going to start again. We're going to bring this side down a little bit more. That is a fresh and sharpened gouge. It only takes a quick couple of passes. If you have your geometry the way that works for you, there's no right or wrong geometry. If you have a geometry that is right for you, that works well for you, once you achieve that, keep it sharp. And it's easier to keep sharp. And when you keep it sharp, you're going to get cleaner, better cuts. Why are we doing that? Hey, Steve, good morning. All right. Now, you'll see I'm using one hand. Okay? I'm using one hand. Why? Because I actually have 3 points of contact to control this gouge. Okay? What are the 3 points of contact? Focus. Come on. The 3 points of contact are the tool to the tool rest, the point of the tool, and the heel here, the blade, into the wood, and then my hand brought into my hip. And I'm just moving my body ever so slowly in order to let the gouge cut through the wood and bring me around. I'm not pushing the gouge into the wood. I'm just letting it feed itself as it cuts around, cut to the wood. I'm not sure how to do that on the front-facing camera. This is something. See, this is the TikTok interface. I'm not sure why it's doing it. It's never done it before. That's really, really weird. Hang on, let me check settings. Sorry. Yeah, I don't even have the only thing I can do is reverse the camera or take it off of reverse. There's no controls except for flipping the camera or mirroring the video. That's really strange. But you can see, look at, you see the little bit of shine off of here? I've got a clean cut because I'm letting the wood come down into the tool and I'm letting the tool do the work rather than working the tool. I'm letting the tool do the work. Now, another important thing when you're getting these clean cuts, right, is getting your tool rest where it needs to be. Burls are fantastic for turning. They're beautiful, but they also present some challenges. Let's see if that helps. Makes my job harder, but okay. Hush you. Where were we going? So what we're doing here is as we start the cut, I'm setting this bevel here, the heel of the tool against the bowl, and I have my gouge closed. Okay, this is open, this is closed. I pick up the cut so that the edge starts cutting, and I keep this angle parallel to the side of the bowl, to the shape of the bowl. And yes, mesquite is gorgeous. Open the gouge to about 45 degrees. What that does is that takes this section of the gouge. When it's closed like this, I have a very wide section of the heel of the gouge in contact with the wood, okay? When I open it, I make that section of the gouge that's in contact with the wood narrower. And I want to keep the section of the gouge that's in contact with the wood as narrow as possible. So when I start out around the edge and I pick up the cut, I have the gouge closed, and then I start to open it, and as I work my way around, what I want to do is imagine that I have a map, right? Now I'm facing this, so this is left to me, this is right to me. If this is a map, right, that's west, that's east, that's north, and that's south, okay? So I want to keep the gouge pointed in the direction that I'm traveling, which is from east to west, okay? Think about it, flip it in your mind. So from your right to your left, I want to keep the gouge pointed, the flute of the gouge pointed in that direction, where I'm going. If I'm thinking of it as a map, this is the United States, this is Seattle, this is New York, right? New York comes into effect when we hollow. On the outside, we're aiming our tool towards Seattle at all times. Now, when we're starting out here, it's a steeper angle to get to Seattle, right? It's up here. But as I come around, if I want to keep that flute facing Seattle, I have to open it. I have to very slowly, as I come around, watch this, open the flute so that it keeps pointing at Seattle. So by the time I'm over here, it's almost 90 degrees. Again, what I'm doing is keeping the most narrow piece of steel in contact with the wood the entire time, the most narrowest piece of steel possible. That gives me an extremely fine, clean cut. Let me show you. Now again, if you look, you see how it's shiny here. It's smooth. Almost no sanding. We start sanding at a higher grit, which means less sanding. We'll come back here. Again, fairly closed to pick up the cut. Open, closed, pointing from east to west. I'm going to pick up that cut, rotate it about 45 degrees, and I'm going to imagine that Seattle is where I'm headed. That's where I'm driving to. So as I come around, allowing the tool to do the work. All I'm doing is holding the tool against the wood, and the sharpness of my tool is removing wood. Very fine shavings, clean, thin, fine shavings. If you've ever used a hand plane, you will notice shavings this fine. That's what you're looking for. Essentially, I'm using the narrowest possible plane. And again, because I'm not shoving the tool into the piece, I'm just holding it there and guiding its direction. It's moving itself around nice and easy, and I'm going to hit that big wide step there. Okay, and it's going to stop. Okay, but because I'm not jamming the tool into it and scraping, but what I'm doing is allowing that tool to slice. Okay. No, this is an Ellsworth grind. 60 degrees swept back. But I'm allowing that to slice. Look at this. I got to give you light so that you can see. Should see. Oh, shit. That light is really. This is actually smooth. This is glossy. There's no torn grain. And down here where I got it, up here I'm still removing air, so I've got a little bounce, so I don't have no tool marks because I'm bouncing. But down here where it's smooth, there are no tool marks. There's no ridges. There's no scrapes. 60 degrees. Look up Ellsworth Grind for a bowl gouge. Larry Ellsworth actually has published a guide on how to do it. It's free on his website. You can also find it on the worldwidewoodturners.org website. Published with permission from Larry Ellsworth. All right. We're going to come around and take this down. You want to take small bites here. We're not taking big. See, if I take too much out, I bog that lathe down. So I want to take smaller bites. Again, I don't want to shove the tool into the wood. I want the wood to come across the blade and feed that blade. My left hand, the whole purpose of my left hand is to hold the tool down. Okay, hold the tool down. I'm not guiding it, I'm not pushing it, I am just holding the tool down. So pick up the cut with the blade fairly closed, open it, point it towards Seattle, and as I travel around, again, the smallest amount of surface area on the gouge. So I want to slowly open it as I move so that I keep it pointed to the Pacific Northwest in our map. Now this is bone dry. This wood has been drying indoors for years. This is the kind of shavings that you normally get off of green wood. By using this slicing technique, you get the same shavings off of dry wood that you can get off of green wood. Just take this edge down real quick so that we can get some smooth passes from top to bottom. But at this point, before we start really finalizing the shape of our bowl, which we have a little bit of a high spot here, before we start to finalize the shape of our bowl, we need to make some decisions about the bottom of the bowl. So here I'm taking a fairly deep cut, about 3/16 of an inch. But look how fine these shavings are. And they're continuous. That's a continuous piece of well, it's going to break as I pull it up, but that's a continuous piece of shaving. So you figure by about 150, 200 revolutions, I've got a mile-long piece of shaving. And this is smooth. This is nice and smooth. Nice, wispy shavings. Yet I'm removing a considerable amount of wood each cut. And one thing you don't want to do, and you can tell, one thing you can tell how good your tool control is and whether or not you're putting too much pressure, okay, is if you come shooting off the end, you see how I just jerked, okay? That's too much pressure. You want to come cleanly off the end. So I'm barely putting any pressure on here. Watch here. Watch my tool. See, I just smoothly pass across the end. Okay, just smoothly pass across the end. Right now, I just have to dispose of them. I use them for my fire pit, and I dispose of most of them. One of the reasons I dispose of most of them is because I turn a lot of exotic woods that have caustic properties. Walnut is actually acidic and can kill everything around it if you put the shavings on the ground. Maple is not. Maple's fairly safe wood, but I just don't have a method of reusing them or recycling them at this point in time. So we have to start thinking about the bottom of our bowl. Now we still have some of that natural edge here. We need to get rid of that. We need to shape this better, and then we need to figure out how we're going to hold the bowl when we flip it around in the chuck. There are two different ways to do that. A tenon. Well, there are three ways to do that. There are more than three ways. There are three main ways to do that. A tenon, a mortise or recess, or a spigot for tenon or spigot, mortise or recess, or a glue block with a flat surface. I want to keep the center so that I can clean up the bottom of the bowl when I finish. So For me, my preferences and the shape I make a bowl, I prefer to use a tenon. So I need to start shaping this down in order to achieve that. And now, once we get past that air, we can start focusing on that really, really clean cut. I'm going to look at the shape of the bowl and how fast I swing my body determines the depth of my cut. I can kind of really smoothly escape here. Yes, I've used shellac. I don't generally use shellac for food-containing objects because alcohol dissolves shellac, and you never know. You can inadvertently get that in contact. But I use a food-safe shellac that I make myself. I mix myself with super blonde shellac from Old World Shellac, de-waxed super blonde shellac, and Everclear. So again, we have to come down to where we have a foot, and let me show you this. We still have a curve here. We've got that natural edge of the log. We need to get rid of that in order to have a clean, safe tenon. Morning snafu. So what we've got to do is start to flatten this out, which is going to reduce the depth of our bowl from top to bottom. Remembering that we have the pith. We have a little bit too much pith here. So we're going to have to come down. When we hollow, we're going to have to come down about that far. So that's going to determine the shape of our bowl overall. Yeah. Yes, you can get a high gloss finish on the lathe. Shellac makes a very, very good friction polish. In fact, most lathe friction polishes are shellac based. Not all, but a large amount. So the way this tenon works, in order for the chuck to hold the bowl, is you have to have a flat shoulder so that you have a place for the shoulder of the chuck jaws to rest against the wood. That friction is what is going to create the drive that holds that bowl there. Not the squeezing, but the friction between the shoulders and this shoulder. So still a little uneven. I've got a high side here and a low side here. You can get away with 3 millimeters of height for a tenon, but 5 is probably a safer bet. So my lowest spot here, that's only 2 millimeters. That's definitely not, that's half of what we need. So we need to go deeper, and then we can finish the shape and finalize the shape of that bowl. And we're going to sharpen one more time before we make our cuts and get that clean surface that almost doesn't need any sanding. So we're going to take this down a little further. Again, now we're going to shift our map. We're going to change our map. Remember, this is our map, right? This is my right hand. That's east. That's the east coast. My left hand is the west coast, north and south. We're going to turn that map 90 degrees. When we're cutting across the bottom, we do the same thing. But remember when I said that New York comes in when you're hollowing? Well, it comes in when you're cutting across the bottom in this direction from the outside in. It always comes in. Here, you're coming from the inside out, going around, you're aiming for Seattle. Here, coming from the outside in, you're aiming for New York. Okay? So the same process. You're going to keep that gouge closed, okay? Very closed. Pick up the cut, rotate it about 45 degrees, and as you come across, you're going to slowly open the flue to that gouge so that you keep it pointed towards New York. And that's going to, again, reduce the amount of surface area of the gouge that is in contact with the wood. So coming around towards Seattle, we're cutting on this side of the tip. Coming around towards New York, we're cutting on this side of the tip. Well, since we just focus so much on the outside of the bowl, cutting towards Seattle, this hasn't been touched, and this doesn't need to be sharpened. It's still as sharp as when I started on the other side. So we don't have to worry about this when we first start cutting. Now, when we're hollowing, it's opposite. This is going to get used the most, and that's going to stay sharp. Okay? So pay attention to that, because that's how you end up getting your gouges off balance. This is just about perfectly dead center. It's a little, I've been doing a lot of spindle turning lately. I've been working from right to left. Spindle turning is a little bit different, so I've sharpened this side a little bit more than this side. It's a tiny bit higher. It's just a wee bit asymmetric. Not enough to make a difference, but it is just a tiny bit asymmetric. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to how you use your gouge. Asymmetry isn't a bad thing. Sometimes that's the way you turn. That's what works best for you. Make the tool work for you. Don't get hung up on angles and grinds and all of that. Grind the tool so that it works the way you need it to work to cut, rather than you trying to fit the tool. It's a tool. Quit working for it. Make it work for you. So, flute closed, pick up the cut, open, and as we move in closer and closer to center, just keep opening the flute, pointing it towards New York, and you'll notice I didn't lean in to that cut. I didn't shove into that cut. I simply let the blade come around or come down in as I slowly swing my body from right to left. And if I go too fast, I lose the cut. Again, my left hand only exists to hold the tool down on the tool rest. I'm not doing anything else with my left hand but just exerting downward pressure. There's one turner, I can't remember his name, when he's teaching tool control. Let me get this up here so you can see. There's one turner who teaches his students to reach underneath the gouge, hook their fingers on it, and pull straight down. Again, so that they're not exerting this kind of pressure, they're just exerting downward pressure. I prefer the knife hand. I'm a military veteran. This is a pretty pertinent symbol. If you know, you know. But all I'm doing, I can't really exert. It's not easy to exert forward and back pressure because I don't need to. That's all done right here. Okay, I can move that whole gouge just by the way it's locked to my body, and my right or my left hand just holds the gouge down on the tool rest. This is secure. Absolutely, I'm not going to lose this gouge, and as long as I keep the flute pointed in the direction I want to go, New York City, I'm not going to get a catch. Now, I can over-rotate and come out of the cut, which I did, but it's really hard to, you're not moving, you're not set up to get in there and dig. You can't. You're locked into a clean slicing cut. That's what I'm teaching you, by the way, is slicing. Now, this is about 8 millimeters. It's about 3 millimeters too deep, which allows me to flatten this surface here. Okay, so we're going to, again, and then we're going to pick up here, and we still have a little bit of natural edge here. So we want to pick that up and come some clean slices away. So we're going to finish our tenon, sharpen, and then make 2 or 3 passes to clean the outside of our bowl. And again, the goal here is no tool marks. So I'm going to show you, because I've been demonstrating and moving around and doing all that. Let's see if I can see this. Look, can you see? Yeah, see that ridge? That's a tool mark. We're going to make some clean finishing passes, and those are going to disappear. And it's all how we control the tool that that achieves that. Hang on a second. There we go. So take this down. Now, coming across the bottom here, you want to make sure that your cutting point is even with the center. You can see I'm a little bit high here, so stop your lathe to adjust your tool rest. And we're just coming straight down across the grain. This is what's called a pull cut. Again, it looks like I'm working with my left hand. I'm just putting weight. I'm just holding it down. Okay? And we're just letting that fairly close to closed. We're basically using this bottom edge like a negative rake scraper. This can also be called a shear scrape. If you open it up a little bit, you get more of a pull cut. Okay, but all we're doing is just flattening that surface out. And then, sorry, I'm fogging up here. We can actually come straight down on our tenon and kind of clean that up. And we can even come straight across here with that pull cut, that negative rake scrape, shear scrape, and get a nice, smooth, clean surface so that we have a flat shoulder so that the shoulder of the chuck can meet the shoulder of the bowl and have a positive connection. At this point, we're ready for our final cuts to shape the outside of the bowl. So before we do those final 2 or 3 cuts, we're going to sharpen. See if I can bring you over here. Now, I've had to, I hope I can get you over here safely. I've had to do some modifications to my Sorby Pro Edge in order to use the Wolverine jig, the one-way Wolverine jig. That is the way that you can, that using the Wolverine jig is how you can reproduce the swept back grind. This is an Irish, it's called an Irish grind, or a, I've lost his name now. I've completely blocked on his name. Ellsworth grind. Okay. So what I've had to do is, because the Sorby, the way that this sits and mounts on your bench, this little bracket here that holds it doesn't fit underneath here. So I had to raise the Sorby up in order to get the bracket in, and that bracket holds my my jig, right? My sharpening jig. But it's too low. So I put a wooden block in with a V-cut in it to gain back that altitude so that I could get the gouge up so that the heel is against the platen of the sharpener. Now you can get out all kinds of gauges and figure out how your gouge is setting, but listen, if you have it set up so that your angle is right, you just make sure that that's flat against the platen, and you've got 60 degrees every time. Now, I'm doing this left-handed so you can see. I usually do this right-handed, but you just walk it around, just like that, and you only need to do it once or twice, and you have a fresh, extremely sharp edge. Hang on a second, let me work the right side one more time. So again, remembering that that's a tiny bit asymmetric and high on what is to me the right side, I'll do that an extra pass just to make sure that I start to correct that a little bit. But again, it doesn't adversely affect my cutting. It actually reflects the style of cutting I do. So I'm going to keep that tool working for me rather than trying to make that tool perfect. As long as it's sharp, a little bit of asymmetry isn't the end of the world. What's important is that the tool is sharp. We can work around the asymmetry. We can change the asymmetry. Go watch Richard Raffin. Richard Raffin, that's 120. Richard Raffin, and you don't need to go finer. 120 works well. 80 is a little rough. 100 is okay. 120 works very well. Richard Raffin turns bowls with a half-inch spindle gouge, and he sharpens it asymmetrically. It's wildly asymmetric, but that's what works for him. Okay? Make the tool work for you. Don't work for the tool. Figure out what works best for you and use it. Yeah, I've got 400 grit, but why do I need this? Doesn't need to be shiny. It needs to be sharp. Okay. All right. Hang on a second. Let me get some water. All right. So, finishing cuts. Again, we're going to pick up here. We have a little bit of torn grain from just because I was demonstrating, so I've got some coarse grain here. Got it just the tiniest of flat spots of that natural edge. Okay, we want to take those away for this particular bowl, and we want to get clean, smooth cuts and a nice continuous curve from top to bottom. Well, my tool rest is straight, right? It's straight as can be. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to split the difference. So basically, I take this angle from here to here, and I mirror it, and this is the high point. The belly of the bowl is the high point, right? So I kind of get to where my tool rest is a half an inch from the high point, and I split the difference. One thing that turners get lost in or get caught up in is they forget that what they're doing is, this is leverage. This is all leverage. This is the lever. The tool rest is the fulcrum. The working end is the gouge against the wood, okay? And the lever end is down here. Now, why do bowl turners have big, long tool handles? To increase their leverage. So that when they get deep into the bowl, their work surface gets further and further across the fulcrum. Well, if you remember playing teeter-totter or science class, when your work end gets further and further away from the fulcrum, you have less torque, you have less power. You're giving that torque to the workpiece. So if we split the difference and we have about an even amount of distance from here and here with a shorter amount in the middle, this is where we have the most torque. Here and here the bowl has the most torque, but we're splitting the difference and we're keeping it fair, as close to even as we can without a curved tool rest. Now you can use a curved tool rest, but you don't have to. I'm showing you how to do this with the basic tools. I have a curved tool rest that'll fit right in the curve of this bowl, and we can just follow that. But not everybody has that, okay? But everybody has a straight tool rest. So here I have less leverage. Here in the middle I have more leverage. And here I have less leverage again. I need to be conscious of the fact that as I pick up my cut, there's more torque here than there is here. As I'm in the middle of the cut, I have the mechanical advantage. And as we get to the end of the cut, I'm transferring that mechanical advantage back to the bowl again. That goes back to how I control the angle of the gouge and how much force I'm putting into the bowl. I can get away with pushing stronger here than I can here, okay? I don't want to have exert as much inward directional force, again, letting the blade cut its way through the wood rather than me ramming it into the wood and tearing the wood. Okay, but I want to put more force here. I'm going to ease up as I start working my way around, and then I have to chase that back kind of downhill. I'm kind of coming up and down. So I have to pay attention to the pressure I'm exerting and try to keep it even here as it is here, which is going to require more from me here because I have less mechanical advantage than it does here where I have more mechanical advantage. That's a really, really wordy explanation, but if you want to, if you have people ask, how are your cuts so smooth? Those are all those things I consider. So, left hand, just holding it down, gouge closed. Pick up the cut, open it. I'm going to swing my body from left to right to settle into that cut. And then I'm just going to very gently let the gouge choose its path through the wood. Understanding that here I need to exert a little less forward pressure from the butt of the gouge into the wood. And I can change the shape of the bowl by simply moving my body. Okay, so I'm turning a lump into the bowl simply by how I move my body. Okay? And then again, as I come around, I'm opening the flute very, very slowly to keep that pointed towards Seattle. Keep it pointed towards the northwest, which is aiming shavings right into my face. I didn't have my legs far enough apart, so I'm actually kind of leaning a little. So I need to bend my knees so that I don't go shooting off the end of the bowl. You want a nice, smooth, clean exit. Okay, so you can see how we move creates those marks, creates those tool marks. So how we move is going to prevent those tool marks. Now let me give you a clean finishing cut. Nice, smooth, consistent. Spread my legs a little so I can just shift my weight. Then I want that high spot to be a little bit less high. Just nice and easy, take it around. Just like that. Now, remember your left hand is just to hold the gouge down, right? When you start the cut, you do want your left hand out here, but when you're going through the cut, if you slide your left hand back to meet your right hand, you have locked a triangle. My elbows are in at my sides, and this is solid. This is actually how the military teaches you to hold a rifle to shoot. Lock in, create a tripod, create a solid base. Your legs wide apart, and you can move. And look at that gouge is not doing this. That gouge is going where I go. I'm using my whole body, and that gives me a clean, smooth, steady cut from bottom to top. Just nice, easy, gentle tool control, move my body. When you start cutting like this, your breath affects the cut of the wood. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. How I'm breathing can affect what happens here. Any bumps on your tool rest can affect what happens here. It translates through the shaft of the tool into the wood. So you start to focus on that, start to think about that. Think about how am I moving and how's that going to affect the wood surface translated through the tip of the blade here. Now, I have a little bit of a weird flare right here. I want to round this corner. I only need to work on this corner. So I can move my tool rest around so that I can make more finite, finer cuts because I'm transferring that mechanical advantage back to me, not giving some to the bowl. That's why we keep the tool rest close to the surface where we're working. Gouge closed, pick up the cut. Once you establish a little bit of a shoulder right there where the heel of the gouge can ride, you can open, point that up towards Seattle. And I'm actually going to swing from my left to my right because I want to lift that cut smoothly out of the surface, and that changes the shape of the bottom of the bowl just a little bit. And we're going to do that. I'm going to move over a little bit more and do that one more time. And I just need to look here and see what my shape is doing. I created a high spot for myself. So we're going to very gently work our way through that. And by allowing the cut to come up out of the bowl, I will blend that smoothly into the overall curve. Just like that. Not bad. Now, let me show you a technique that you can't really do it with a 40-40 grind, but you can do it with an Ellsworth or an Irish grind. And this is called shear scraping, and I showed you a little bit down here. But what you do is you hold that gouge almost completely closed. That's fully closed, 90 degrees. You're going to open it just a little bit. That creates essentially a negative rake scraper on the bottom wing of the gouge. And you can use this entire surface from here to here as a scraper. Okay. Now, this is actually curved very slightly upwards, but as you open it, it actually flattens out. The contact with the wood actually gets flatter. So you end up with a very nearly flat, but just very slightly curved scraper. Now, if you go look at Richard Raffin. He makes shear scrapers, and if you look at the shape of the shear scraper, it's almost exactly the same curve. It's a little bit more pronounced, but it's that same very slight curve. So you're going to take that, you're going to come move your whole body, again, locking that tripod in. You're going to move your whole body, and you're just going to address it like this, and move your body. That gives you control. And then you can come the other way, flip it over, again, very much closed, creating that negative rake scraper, and move your whole body. Move your body, don't move your arms in the gouge, and that will prevent getting those waves and those tool marks in there. A lot of people think scraping, so the other way is I'm coming to the right of it, I'm swinging over, and I'm locking it on the left side of my body. A lot of people think scraping is a bad word. I think scraping is an essential part of a clean bowl of the process, but you need to know how to do it correctly. Now we are getting super, super fine, I call these angel hair shavings. Super fine shavings, okay? Now, because of the angle I have the tool rest, I need to flip the tool. But if I don't like where I'm putting my body, see, my arm is way away from my body. I'm not locking it in. Okay? Right? I'm not locking it in. It's away from my body. So if I don't like that angle, all I got to do is move the tool rest so that I can get my body closer and get the angle so that I have complete control. And as long as I don't close the flute too far and catch the top edge, I can't get a catch. So very, very gentle. If I think that I have a perceived high spot, I can just work it very gently. Nice and easy. And I'm barely touching the wood. I am barely touching the wood with that blade. This is a shear scrape. It is super fine. Okay? I'm not grinding in. I'm barely touching it, and I'm getting these wispy angel hair shavings, okay? Just gentle, nice and easy. Smooth, continuous, flowing motion. And that is a buttery smooth surface off the tool. No sanding. Sorry, I bumped you. I apologize. That is a buttery smooth surface off the tool. No sanding. No torn grain. No tool marks. Clean. Now we're going to translate that to the inside. So here's my rule for sanding. If I think I can get away with starting at 240 grit, which I can, I start at 180 grit. So if I think I can get away with starting at 180 grit, I'll start at 120 grit. Why? Because when you start sanding, you can reveal torn grain that you didn't see at that higher grit, but that will be removed at the lower grit. I could get away with 240 here, so I'll start sanding at 180. I finish at 400, so I will stand at 180, 240, 320, and 400, rather than starting at 80, 120, 180, 240, 320, 400. So I've removed 2 steps, and I've removed about, well, I'll show you. I've removed probably 20 minutes worth of sanding. You always want to spend the most amount of time sanding at the lowest grit. So if I'm starting at 180, I'm going to spend the most amount of time sanding at 180. And the reason for that, hang on, left hand. I want to make sure the camera didn't flip. I bumped it, accidentally locked my phone. Okay. So I'm going to spend the most amount of time sanding at 180, which means that once that I'm getting any bad features, any torn grain, all of that, I'm getting that out at 180. I'm going to work that out so that when I sand at the higher grits, all I'm doing with those higher grits is removing the marks I made sanding at the lower grit. So this is actually not going to take Well, somebody time me, but I'm guaranteed that we're going to sand for less than 10 minutes. So go ahead and start the timer now while I'm screwing around, just getting dust out of the way and stuff so that I can see my progress. Okay, I'm going to get my sander. This is an inertia sander called this is the Wood Turner's Turbo Turner inertia sander from woodturnerswonders.com, and this is 180 grit. This is some of the box elder from the golf club, snafu. Okay, I slow my lathe down. This is something a lot of British turners don't do, and it drives me absolutely crazy. Richard Raffin, perfect example. He never slows his lathe down to sand. Sanding is a friction. Sanding is friction, okay? So if the faster you go, the less contact between the sandpaper and the wood you make, and the less sanding and removal of material you're doing, and the more burnishing you're doing. I don't care how clean the surface is that you produce, if you don't slow your lathe down to let the sandpaper do its job, then you're not going to get the same finished product. You can still get a very fine product. I'm not saying Richard Raffin's bowls look like garbage. They don't. But you're not getting the same level of finish or gloss that you get if you slow the lathe down and allow the sandpaper to do its job. So I'm sanding in the normal direction, lathe going forward. The inertia, the actual motion of the bowl across this disc with bearings in here allows that to turn. And I'm going to actually reverse the direction of the sandpaper by where I put pressure. Okay, and see, when I mess around, I lose the edge. But where I put pressure changes the direction of the sandpaper. So if I put pressure here, it goes that way. If I put pressure here, it goes that way. But something I do to help ensure that I get a finer finish is I always sand in both directions, forward and reverse. Okay, now you're timing me, and I'm talking and explaining what I'm doing while I'm doing it, and I'm stopping the lathe and I'm showing you. Okay, well, we did about 4 or 5 passes in 180 in the forward direction, and we'll do about the same at 180 in the reverse direction. And you can see that there's no marking, there's no lines, there's no nothing. This is a smooth surface at 180 grit. Time to step it up to 240. Get a new piece. Now you're timing me, and I'm telling you this is going to be fully sanded in less than 10 minutes. And that includes me fishing and trying to figure out where my 240 grit is. Now before I get to that, and this is how I get these really fine finishes I get on my bowls. Before I get to that, what I'm going to do is raise the grain. Some people call this a water pop. I don't care what you call it. I don't use water. I used isopropyl alcohol, 91% isopropyl alcohol. What this does is the liquid soaks into the end grains and swells them. And then when we hit it with the next grit, we sand that back, and that is going to make a smoother surface. The reason I use alcohol over water is water takes about 20 or 30 minutes to evaporate, and it's cool today. It is, hang on, TikTok is making me verify I'm still here. It is cool today. It's not very warm. It's only 47 in the shop at the moment. It's going to get up to 60s today, but it would take the water about half an hour, 45 minutes to evaporate. Whereas with the application of a little bit of air, I can dry this off and start my next grit in about 2 minutes. So I've raised the grain. It does the exact same thing as water. It just takes far less time to evaporate, which makes me move faster. It makes my process work quicker. Is this extra? Is this absolutely necessary? Not at all. But this is something that I put into the bowls that I make. Now that's not completely dry, but that's dry enough. The friction from the sandpaper will allow that to evaporate, but I can also just put my hand on there and create a little bit of friction. But that's dry enough to keep going. This is 240 grit. We'll take 2 passes from right to left and back. We'll flip it and reverse it and do the same thing. Now, am I telling you you'd only do 2 passes each way? No, I'm just saying that's what I'm doing for this bowl. Sand as much as you feel you need, but because I got any major discrepancies out, and my lathe is going to, dust builds up. This is a known problem in the Laguna 1216s. Dust builds up in the reverse switch. There we go. You just blow that out. It's almost time to replace that switch. I have a replacement. It's not a big deal. I just keep it clean and it stops. So 1 full pass, 2 full passes. That's all I need to sand at 240. That is a really nice surface. And if I was just doing an oil finish, only oil, I would probably stop here. I wouldn't go any much further. Now, one thing I'm going to show you is things pop up when you start sanding. This has got some bug damage, and this is actually called frass. This is what's left when those worms work their way through the wood. So here, there wasn't any frass left, but that means the bugs went that way. So one thing you might want to do, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want to show it to you, is you definitely want to dig that out, and you may want to find ways to fill those holes. I like to leave the holes. I think it's fun. It gives it a little more character, and it shows you why the tree died. It was bug damage. But be aware of that. You'll find it. That's not going to be smooth no matter what you do. Okay, so 240, 2 passes forward, 2 passes back. Now, I already raised the grain, and the grain that was going to swell up, and I sanded it back. Why am I wetting it again? What I'm doing now, and this is a trick I learned from a furniture maker here on TikTok, what I'm doing now is cleaning that 240 grit off before I sand it 320, so I don't put 240 grit scratches in my 320 grit surface. Again, a little air applied. Another way you can dry it is just turn the lathe on high and let centripetal force do its job. Again, that's a smooth surface. It's safe to provide friction with your hand and help that evaporate a little bit more. Okay, we're going to go to 320 grit, which is Racha. What's my time? How am I doing? Anybody actually paying attention to how long it's taking to sand? Okay, from left to right and back. Once. Twice. Reverse the lathe. Same thing. And again, by slowing the lathe down, I'm at 475 RPM. I allow the sandpaper to do its job. 5 minutes left. Look at that. I only have 1 more grit to go and then using sanding paste. Okay? Now, how many wood turners have you heard say things like they spent hours sanding a bowl? But by coming off of the bowl with no tool marks, with clean slicing cuts, okay, with clean slicing cuts, I've reduced my sanding time by 50 minutes. Still got 5 minutes left, and I'm sitting here doing more yakking than I am sanding. Okay, 400 is the last grit because then I'm going to sanding paste. Hello, Victor. Now, we still have some alcohol evaporating. You don't have to use liquid. I find liquid makes it better. It just, swelling the grains makes it better. But another way you can make sure that your surface is clean before going to a higher grit is just air. Is it as clean as alcohol? Probably not. But air does the job pretty well. So again, there's that frass tool that works really well to remove that is a dental pick, which, this is an actual old dentist's pick that was too worn to continue being sterilized and reused. That is a very effective tool for removal of frass. You can go at it with a burr, conical burr, or a little spherical burr with your Dremel and remove it. There are a lot of different ways to get this out. And again, I usually leave the holes. I don't fill them, but if you choose to fill them, there are a lot of ways to do that too. So dental picks are a great tool. Now, you missed the whole first part of the live, but I'm going to publish it on the Tube of You because I go in depth into that slice and cut. You can also join us at the Worldwide Woodturners meetings on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. We meet every Wednesday. We have demos from world-class woodturners every Wednesday. And one of those is Mark Saleh, who is the master at wood slicing and teaches the technique. We were blessed with a demonstration by him 2 weeks ago. And he's going to be doing some bowl turning demos soon. Okay, so that was 2 full passes left to right and back with 400. We're going to do in the reverse direction. We're going to do the same thing in the forward direction. Okay, we're still under 10 minutes. But remember what I said. If you do the work at the lower grit, then as you get higher, all you're working on at the higher grits is removing the marks that you made sanding at the lower grits. You're not fixing any mistakes. You're not removing any tool marks. That all happened at 180 grit. We are done with sandpaper. No more sandpaper. Now, this is a technique I use. You don't have to use it. I find this finishing technique and this finishing product works very, very well. I think it creates a beautiful finish. And I am also sponsored by Brad's Workbench, but I would tell you this is one of the best finishing methods and finishing products, whether or not I was sponsored. But I do have to be honest and say that I'm sponsored. This is Brad's Workbench Extra Fine Sanding Paste. It is a friable abrasive, meaning the more you work it, the finer it gets, with some mineral oil and I think a little beeswax involved. You just rub it in. Now, there are other products on the market, Hampshire Sheen, Yorkshire Grit. Use what is available to you. Use what you like. I like Brad's. I recommend Brad's. And the reason I'm sponsored by Brad's is not because I went to him and said, hey, sponsor me and I'll sell your stuff. It's because I started using Brad's, figured out that this was the best finishing paste that I have used on the market, and started telling people, hey, I use this stuff. I love this stuff. I really recommend it. And he came to me and said, hey, how would you like me to sponsor you? Because you sell my stuff. And I was like, cool, thanks. So you apply it. As you're working it in like this, you can feel it start to kind of dig in. Okay, now you're going to start slow with your lathe slow, about 400. On this band, I've got 3 pulleys. On this pulley, 320 is the slowest. Using the wet part of your paper towel, you're just going to make sure you work it in, okay? You're just going to make sure that we've got an even coverage. Now, we'll flip to a dry part of the paper towel, kick it up 100 RPM, 450. And we're going to keep working it. Okay, remember this is a friable abrasive. The more you work it, the finer it gets. Okay, I'm still removing material. My paper towel is dirty. Flip it to a clean part of the paper towel, kick it up at 100 RPM. Okay, I'm still removing material. Flip it over to a clean part of the paper towel, kick it up 100 RPM. In my experience, by the time you reach 1,000 RPM using Brad's Workbench sanding paste, you're done. You're no longer removing any material. You're just burnishing at that point in time. So you just rinse and repeat until your paper towel comes away clean. You shouldn't need to go much over 1,000 RPM, even in spindle orientation. But the key is start slow and work your way up, just like you start with a low grit and work your way up. Same idea. Just using speed instead of grit. But it's also grit because this is a friable abrasive, and the more you work it, the finer it gets. Okay? So we're just about there. We're just about at 1,000 RPM. Okay. Not putting a lot of pressure on here. I'm letting the lathe move the wood across the towel and break down that grit, and let do the work. And look at that beautiful semi-gloss or satin finish here. Now there's no finish. That's just sanding. That's just the sanding paste. There's no finish. And that is a beautiful surface. Now Brad has two finishes. He has tongue wax, which is pure tongue oil, beeswax, and carnauba wax. And he has tongue honey, which is also pure tongue oil, beeswax, and carnauba wax. The difference is you put the tongue wax on, let it sit, the tongue oil start to soak in for about 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. Then you come back on the lathe and buff it. You turn the lathe up to about 1,000 RPM and you buff it, and that melts the wax and gives you that smooth, clean, shiny wax surface, okay? The tongue honey does the same thing, but you don't have to use it power buffing. It's more oil to wax ratio, and so it does the exact same thing, but you come back half an hour later and you just hand buff it off the lathe. 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other, both equally good. I'm doing a demonstration today, so I'm not going to put any finish on it. I'll finish it with tongue honey off the lathe. Okay? Now, we have to finish our tenon so that we can reverse this into the chuck. The chuck I use is the Nova G3, and it has dovetail tenons, meaning I need a slight inward angle here. So what I'm going to do is use my skew as a negative rake scraper and cut the dovetail in here so that I can mount this on the tenon. Just like that, okay? I'm going to take a little bit more down. It's a little wide of a tenon. How do I know? Well, this is the 60 millimeter jaws, and that's about the same as the width of my 60-degree live center here. So I just created a little bit of a dovetail. Remember, that's about 5 mil thick, okay? Now, one thing to remember if you're using a tenon on a bowl is that this is cross-grained. So if you over-tighten your tenon, that can shear this tenon right off. And that's why a lot of people don't like tenons, because they've had that happen. If you're using the Nova chuck, there's a reason why. There are two versions of the Nova chuck. There's the old version, and this is the new version on here, but I have an old version. The old version has a little tooth. See that there's a little tooth right there at the top of the jaw. Right there. See that tooth? That actually digs into the grain and can shear it. It's like a wedge. The new version does not have that tooth on the jaw, so it doesn't shear it. So understand what you've got. Sometimes, like if you've got the old version, either get new jaws or use a recess with expansion rather than contraction onto a tenon. Or you can use a glue block. Lyle Jamieson, a very famous bowl turner, I took his ABCs of bowl turning class, and he refuses to use a chuck. He uses glue blocks on faceplates. So there are so many different methods. Find what works for you. So again, I had this on a woodworm chuck, and you'll see here what held that bowl. You see where the jaws of the chuck, the shoulder of the chuck jaws, dug into the wood. That friction, as I screwed it on, that friction, that pressure is what held the bowl, not the threads of the screws, but actual the pressure that it forced, that the threads forced the wood down onto that jaw. That's what held the bowl. So you see wood turners struggling to get it off the woodworm. Oh, I can't get it out, I can't get it out. And they're doing all kinds of things. They're waxing the woodworm screw and doing all crazy things because they can't get it off. It's not the screw threads that are holding it. It's the pressure here. So how do you relieve the pressure? Just unscrew it. Take it out. Then you can just use a pair of pliers and unscrew it right out of the bowl. So if you have that problem, I didn't this time, but if you have that problem, just take it out of the chuck jaws and you should be able to remove the woods worm screw with no problem with a pair of pliers so that you can hang on to it. So I have the center here. I'm going to loosely tighten this. I'm going to bring my tailstock up, lock it down, and I'm going to loosen the jaws, and I'm going to drive the bowl down onto the shoulders of the chuck so that I make sure I have a positive connection between the shoulder of the chuck jaws and the shoulder, the flat shoulder that I made on the bowl. That is going to create that same friction that we got here, and that's going to help hold this bowl. And then I'm going to tighten this firmly, but I'm not going to crank down on it. I'm going to tighten it firmly. Again, because I do not want to split that grain and crack that tenon right off the bowl. Okay, that's the failure that a lot of turners have happen, is they over-tighten this, and it'll split the wood, split the grain of the wood. We don't need to do that. Now, the tenon is sized correctly. You have about an eighth of an, there it is, you have about an eighth of an inch gap right here. That's going to be an almost perfect fit of contact between jaw and tenon and hold your bowl. So it is always smart to keep the tail center. This is some of the box elder from the golf club, from the National Golf Course, Victor. That's why it's got this rich brown color instead of bright red and white. It's always smart to keep your tail center in for as long as possible. That helps ensure, as you're getting some bulk out of the way, which is a pretty rough. We're going to do some bulk removal here, which is a lot of work, and it's a lot of leverage, and it's hard. And there's going to be banging. It's rough, okay? We have to take down, remember, we have to take down some of the pith here. We got to get a nice even rim of our bowl. We're going to gouge some wood out. So if we keep the tail center in, that helps ensure that we don't make that tenon fail while we're doing the hard work, the rough work, the work that creates a lot of torque and a lot of leverage is used, okay? So if we keep this between centers for as long as we can, we affect the tenon less and we have a greater chance of survival of that tenon, we prevent that tenon from failing. So again, set your tool rest so that the center of the part that's cutting is even with the center of the wood, okay? And you want about between a quarter of an inch and a half inch space here, and rotate it by hand. Make sure you're not going to hit anywhere. This is not very uneven, but if this was a natural edge bowl, hello Van, this is a natural edge bowl that was wavy, we would have some friction, we'd have some smacking. We don't want to do that, so we rotate it by hand to make sure everything's clear. We're starting slow, we'll work our way up, but this is pretty much balanced, and we can get back in to the same speed range that we were cutting the other side. And we're going to start simply by taking off this rim and cutting straight in. Same technique, gouge fairly closed, open it, point it towards New York. Remember, we turned our map 90 degrees. Okay, so we're going to keep that pointed to New York, and we're going to flatten this off. Again, left hand exists to hold the blade, to hold your gouge down. Doesn't direct the gouge in any way. Literally, I'm starting on my heels and slowly moving to my toes. That's it. I've got the gouge locked against my body, locked on it's down on the tool rest. The force of the wood coming around down to the blade and into the blade holds that down, and then I just simply rock and let the blade do the work. Let the tool do the work. I'm not doing anything but guiding the tool and telling it what direction to go. And even with a hogging cut, that's a lot. That's wide. That's almost a quarter of an inch wide. It's nice, clean, even shavings on dry wood, okay? Let the tool do the job. Now, I got down past the pith. Now I want to think about, well, what's the width of my bowl going to be? So I'm going to make a notch, essentially, right? I'm going to start right over here, right about there, and that's going to be the width of my bowl. Okay? just there. Boom, that's the width of my bowl. Now, this is sharp. Do a little shear scrape. Might have to move your tool rest a little, but you don't want that sharp edge. You don't. This will cut you. If you bump this, you will bleed. Soften it immediately. Get that's dangerous. Get that out of the way first thing. You can do it with a shear scrape. Boom. Or you can round it. I like a rounded rim, so I can go ahead and start shaping the outside of the rim of my bowl. But no matter what, you want to soften that edge so you don't bump it, because you will cut yourself, and then you got blood on the bowl and you can't sell it because, safety. So be careful. Okay, we'll get our tool rest back around here. So we know that's the width, and we can start bulking, just removing bulk. So again, gouge fairly closed. Open it, and we're just going to ride that in. And you can see I've got more mechanical advantage than the bowl does. I have too much leverage, right? So I don't need to cut that deep because I have too much leverage. So I'm going to take a step. Okay, again, I'm removing bulk. I'm just trying to take mass out, but that doesn't mean I can't practice good technique while I'm doing it. Okay, and what these steps do is establish a place where I can get the heel of the gouge so that I can take a good, clean, continuous cut. Now, there's a lot of argument about this. And some people say, well, you start at the center and you work your way out, and that's how you turn a bowl. I like thin-walled bowls. If you're going to turn thin-walled bowls, and we're talking this is 3/16 of an inch. That's a thin wall, even for a bowl this small. So 3/16 of an inch. That is going to, the wood will flex when it's that thin, okay? That will flex. And I have a little bit of that grain right here, so I need to take my rim down a little bit more, but that's going to flex as I take stuff out. So if I start in the middle and work my way out and get to 3/16 of an inch, it's going to actually, centripetal force will cause it to misshape and football on me as it's going around, and I can break it with my gouge unintentionally because it's actually not staying round. However, if I leave bulk in the middle as I remove as much as possible, so I turn, say, down the first inch of the bowl, but I leave the center in, the center prevents that wood from flexing. So if I take my time, work my way from the outside in, leave bulk in here to prevent flexion, I can get those nice, clean, thin walls with clean cuts and no tool marks because I'm not fighting the bowl doing the wibbly-wobblies, all right? So I had someone who claimed to have been a student of Richard Raffin lambaste me for this technique. And what he wasn't understanding was, by doing it this way, I guarantee that I'm not letting that bowl flex out of control and losing the shape of it as I hollow. So I am basically making it possible to have clean, consistent cuts with no tool marks. But you know, the one thing that wood turners can agree on, if you put a couple wood turners in a room, the one thing that any two of them can agree on is what the third one is doing wrong. There's no wrong or right way to do it. There's safe and unsafe, right? There are safe and unsafe ways to do it, and there are ways that might be more effective than others. Remember what I said about the shape of your gouge? Same thing with the method you use to turn a bowl. Do what works for you. If it works to do it the other method, use the other method. And depending on what I'm turning, I might use the other method. Like when I turn end grain mortars and pestles, the mortar is always turned from the inside out. Yep, exactly, Steve. Ask 10 turners a question, you'll get 10 different answers. And none of the only one that's the wrong answer is the one that's dangerous. The one that's not safe is probably not a good answer. However, it is a method to get the job done. So again, all I'm doing right now is bulking. I'm just hogging out material, removing as much material as I can as safely as possible. But as you can see, I'm starting to get into the territory where this is in my way. So regardless of how much I want safety to be involved as far as keeping it between centers, when you're hollowing a bowl, at some point, it just gets in your way and it's no longer safe to have there. But we've removed roughly a third of the bulk that needs to be... No, it's because I'm leaning too hard. It's my own fault, Steve. I'm too busy talking and not paying attention to my technique. I know exactly. I know what I'm doing. I'm screwing up. All right, so remember I said we're going to remove the first inch of the bowl on a little 8-inch bowl like this. Now, if this is a 12-inch bowl, we could go 2 inches down. We could keep doing because we're going deeper and this doesn't get in the way as fast. If this is a platter, we could do most of it and leave the center there. Well, it is being lagoonary, but not it's my fault. I'm lagunarizing it, as it were. Okay, so I have removed about a third of the bulk of this bowl. It only seems, well, that's not really true. Well, think about it. This is a 3-inch deep bowl. I'm an inch deep, and this is wider. So if you sit and do math, I've removed about a third of the bulk of this bowl. This is box elder from a tree that was grown on the National Golf Course in Greensboro, North Carolina. So the mineralization is from all the fertilizers and things that they use in a golf course to keep it super green. I think we did. Are we best friends now? Appreciate you, Steve. All right, Steve is a brilliant turner. If you appreciate turning and you appreciate instructional turning like this, you really need to follow Steve T. Brilliant multi-axis turner. This man has a head for multi-axis I do not have, but I'm trying. Okay, so I had to get that out of the way, but I just bulked. I just removed about a third of the bulk here. But here's where we break our rule of our solid triangle, but we don't really break our rule because we're just going to change where our triangle is. Remember, the way that we use this, the way that we do this, right, is we want that heel in there. We want that heel in there, and that's going to help guide our cut and control our cut, right? And we're going to keep the least amount of surface area involved, which is why we rotate as we cut. But in order to keep the heel parallel with the cut, we have to kick we had to kick that out there. We had to really move that out there, right? And I can't get my body through the bed of the lathe, okay? I'm turning at about 900. 900's a good, this is an 8-inch bowl. 900's a good RPM to turn this 8-inch bowl. So, 970. But I'm not saying turn at 970. Turn at the speed that you feel safe and comfortable and that is incommensurate with the level of your ability, okay? So, I have to swing this out. Now here, although my left hand still exists solely to hold the gouge down, I'm just exerting downward pressure. I'm going to rock my hip against the bed of the lathe, and my elbow is still going to stay as close in as I can to my body. Closed, right? Closed gouge. Open it. And I'm going to swing this. So my elbow is locked here. My other elbow is locked here. And I'm going to, again, swing my body so that I still am maintaining a tripod with as much support of this gouge. The gouge is not moving. I'm moving, okay? So I'm still maintaining as much support to the gouge as possible. Moving my body. So although I am swinging that tool, that handle of that tool way far away from me, right? I'm still not losing control. And then I can move my hand back as I let that come in. And the next pass, I'm actually going to move the camera so you can see what I just did there, okay? Because this is all about how you control the tool, and you control the tool by the way you move your body. So let's see if we can get this into edge. Using it vertical, this is hard to teach using a vertical. Okay, closed, elbow, elbow against my side, lock, right? This is my third point of contact. So my elbows are the two legs of the triangle right here, and that's the third leg of the triangle. Okay? Folks, wear your face shield, but it's fogging, so I have to keep it up because I can't see. I apologize. It's the temperature and the humidity right now in North Carolina. It's just right where my breath is fogging. So, start the cut, open the gouge, open the flute. Okay, slowly bring my body back, nice and easy. Okay, and then I'm drawing my elbow along the side of my body to get into that lock, and I just created so much leverage I stopped my lathe. Okay, so slowly. Slowly, but what I'm doing is sliding that point of contact back until I lock it. Let's see if I, just like this, until I get it locked here, at which point I'm coming across the bottom with that gouge almost all the way open, and I'm leaning in again. So this is very much like rowing a boat, except the oar's down, here the oar's up. I'm reverse rowing a boat. I'm rowing up, okay? Now, this edge, this is my thickness, right? That's my thickness, about 3/16 of an inch. I need to start cutting straight down and get that wall, but I've still got this bulk here, so this is not flexing. Okay, so kick that out. We're going to shear scrape here and round our rim a little bit. Nice. We're going to pick this cut up with the gouge closed. Watching over here. I'm looking down here because I can't see what the tip of the tool is doing, but I can see the cut I'm making. Gouge closed. Open the flute. And I've got to keep that riding straight down until I start to swing it, because I've got almost vertical sides here, right? I've got almost vertical sides. So I'm going to ride straight down and then start slowly bringing it around. And I've almost got the first inch of that bowl done. So I took a little step. I don't know if you can see, there's a little step here. So I can come back and pick that cut up. And I'm taking less than 1/16 of an inch per bite here, tiny bites. Okay? And then I can feel that is a consistent thickness. Then I can close that flute and bring it in and shear scrape and make sure that I get any ridges, any tool marks out. Just like that. Nice, clean, smooth, no tear out, no torn grain, no tool marks. That is clean, okay? The first inch of this bowl is done. From here to here is an inch deep. It's done. I can start bulking out some more. I can start thinning this down, this center down, and start working my way deeper into the bowl. So I need to take the tool rest a little bit deeper. Remember, this is a lever, and right now we want the mechanical advantage to stay with us as much as possible. All right? So here we go. Again, we're going to pick up that step. We're just going to bulk some more out. And at this point, it's about time to get rid of that center. We'll do that in a second. Let's just kind of hog out some bulk. I'm making very aggressive cuts. I'm choking up my lathe because I have far more mechanical advantage with the long end of the leather here in my hand, right? I've got the mechanical advantage, okay? So it's my fault the lathe is bogging because I'm just putting too much pressure on it. Except guess what? I'm barely putting any pressure on it. It's leverage. I just have all that leverage in my right hand because I've got 3/4 of an inch of gouge sticking over and I've got 16 inches hanging off the back end. So I definitely have the mechanical advantage here. Again, watching over there because I can't see what's happening with my gouge. Okay, and I'll get this bulk. Still getting good, clean shavings. They're just wild. Hush you. I can bog the delta down just as well. All right, I got to get rid of this, right? I got to get rid of this. Now, the grain is going this way right here. So a clean way and fast, efficient way to do that is not to try to do what I was doing and shave it this way like it's a bowl, but is to come here down across the grain. And I'll show you the difference. So this way, I'm coming across, right? But I have a lot. Let's talk about leverage again, okay? I have a lot of torque here where I have a lot less torque in this little 5mm tenon down here. And if I start cranking on this, I'm going to rock that tenon right out. I'm going to blow my bowl right out of here. So if I try to take a 1/4 inch wide cut and really just hog that out, I'm going to blow that right off the tenon. So if I take a small cut like this, that's 1/8 of an inch, okay, I'm protecting from that because I'm not removing a lot of material, right? But I'm also it's slow. And then when I get in here, this is another physics thing and a geometry thing. This is all turning at the same rate of speed, about 900 RPM, right? But this in here has less distance, right? This is less distance around than it is distance around here around the rim. So this is actually moving at a faster rate of speed in order for the same amount of distance to make 180 degrees than this is. This is slower. So it has more leverage, more torque, because it's moving at a slower, it's the same RPM, revolutions per minute, but the speed with which this point makes it around is slower than the speed with which this point makes it around. It's wheel physics. It's freaking weird. The math is crazy. If you ever look at the math, it blew my mind. But there's more torque here. So the bowl has a mechanical advantage as I get the cutting edge in here that I lose that mechanical advantage, okay? So this right here, forcing this and jamming it into the slow wood where there's more mechanical advantage to the bowl than there is to me can cause it to rip that tenon right out. So you really want to be easy and gentle in the middle. Well, I'm trying to remove bulk. I'm trying to get wood out, right? It's in my way. Come cut down across the grain. Now here, I could take a 1/4 inch wide chunk, and I'm cutting straight down. But look at that. I'm hogging a considerable amount of material out fast. Right? Look at that. I'm just moving that stuff. What I'm doing in a lot of ways is contradicting that mechanical advantage by changing the direction of the force that I'm applying. So instead of the force going this way, which works as a lever against this, I'm pushing the force down in and just reconfirming the positive contact and hold I have here with the chuck jaws and the tenon. I'm just pushing it down into the chuck, which rather than across the chuck, I'm pushing down into the chuck, which allows me to take much more. And see, that just broke. That just cross grain just broke. But I can remove much more material with kind of contradicting that force by pushing inward rather than levering across. So, and that was a lot of material, and it's gone. And I didn't have to be careful taking it because I wasn't fighting against the hold here. All right, now, still want to keep bulk. This is very thin wall. Chuck Norris just looks at a tree and bowls fall out of it. So I still can keep bulk here, right, because I don't want to flex because I've got this real thin wall, so I got to come back and work on that wall and get this down here. So we're doing the same thing. I'm going to move the camera again so you can kind of see what my body's doing more than what the bowl's doing. We got to kick that out, so I'm going to get that elbow in. Let's see if I can get you. Get that elbow in, okay? I've got to get this, the heel of the gouge, parallel with the shape of the bowl. So I got to come in, pick that cut up, and then I'm going to open to about 45 degrees, and I'm going to do that row. I'm rowing my boat. I'm going to lift that tip up in an arc and open the gouge, open the flute of the gouge as I rotate so that I keep that pointing towards New York on my map. Okay? Steve's just picking. Steve's just having fun picking. He actually chose a jet over a Laguna because he was going to buy a Laguna, but the Laguna doesn't have a rotating head, so you can't get pieces wider than this distance because the Laguna doesn't have a rotating head. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Laguna is an excellent machine. This lathe has done everything I've thrown at it. But it does have challenges because I throw some wild stuff at it. I'm sorry I'm putting my face shield up. I cannot see. I'm fogging because of the temperatures and the humidity. Know that that is dangerous. Avoid it if you can. All right, so I've got the 2nd inch. That is the same thickness. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to shear scrape. That's one of the advantages of this Ellsworth grind or Irish grind, is I've got that long wing, and I can come in and shear scrape. Another tool you can use is an actual scraper. Actually, you know, this is my 2nd Laguna. They replaced my first one, and I had excellent customer service. Excellent. It's changed over the years. It used to be horrible. But I'll show you the scraper in the bottom because I'm done. I'm there. I need to do a tiny bit of shear scraping, but this I can't bring the big scraper in. I'll go right through the wall of the bowl. Okay, again, I've got a little bit of a facet here, so I want to kind of pay a little bit of attention to my rim real quickly with the shear scrape. We're just going to roll, closed flute, very gentle contact, and we're just going to roll that around. And that took away that facet. That's nice and clean. And that's really good. That's really good. That's nice. I know you can't see the wood. I'm showing you how I'm using my body to control the tool. I'll move back to the wood in a minute. So, back to the wood. We've got this center bulk, but we're at the bottom edge. So we're at 2 inches depth. We've got a third of the bulk left, a little less, right? We've got this center here that we need to get out, okay? And we've got the bottom of the bowl to turn. So again, now here it's a little more difficult. Here it's a little more difficult to cut down, but you can still do it. But remember, this is a lever. This is the fulcrum. And the further the point of the blade, the further the cutting edge of the blade gets in, the less mechanical advantage I have, which means the further back down the tool I need to go in order to maintain the same amount of mechanical advantage as up here. I can still cut down across the grain. But essentially, by the time I get this middle knob level, I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to have to change directions and start coming across. Okay? At this point, there's too much wall here. This is too deep. I can't go down. Say what back? I'm sorry. I'm trying to teach. I'm not paying a lot of attention to the chat. Okay. So now, leverage is key. Here at this point, the method of coming from the inside out actually is a little bit more effective than trying to work the walls down more, because I'm now working on getting to the depth. Okay? So, again, make sure that your tool is at the center. I'm a tiny bit high, just a skosh. So I'm going to drop that just a little bit. And here I can scoop. Notice I'm starting with a closed flute and opening, again, that reverse row motion. Let me show you my arms again. Steve's wearing his smarty pants today. Okay, watch what I'm doing. Elbow in. Let's try to get this. Elbow in, right? Elbow in. Okay, but I have to push the handle the gouge away from my body. Elbow in. Okay, I'm drawing my elbow back along my side, keeping it locked to my body. In the same way, my left elbow in. I'm pulling both arms back, drawing my elbows and bringing this lock in, right? I'm sliding my lock forward and back, okay? At the same time, I'm dropping my right arm, okay? Dropping my right arm as I come back so that the tip of the gouge is traveling, remember, from closed to open. There's a lot of motions here. I'm starting closed and working my way open slowly, keeping it pointed northeast towards New York City, okay? I'm dropping my right hand so that the tip comes up and sweeps down in the reverse. This is a row. This is how we row a boat. I'm going in reverse. And I'm rolling my wrist back to keep the minimum width of surface contact from the tip to the heel in order to get that clean slicing cut. This is very complex motion. But if you break it down into little parts, it gets easier. So you learn flute close to open, that rotation first, okay? And then you learn to lock those elbows. And move your arms back. Okay, and then you learn to cut with a little arc. And you start to put it all together until you get clean cuts. This is building muscle memory. This is the same way the military teaches a soldier to fire a rifle. Repetitive motion, muscle memory. Start with the small pieces and put them together. Okay, so now we'll get in here. So that you can see the cuts happening. Now, I have about 1.5 inches left in the bottom of this bowl. I'm about 1 inch here. It's early, but one thing we want to do is gauge our depth. So we'll come in with some kind of a depth gauge. You can make one that has a flat surface. I'm just eyeballing. It's really easy to make one. You take a piece of wood, you drill a hole, you stick a dowel through it. But I can look and see it. I have 1.5 inches to go down. So I'm just setting this up, okay? Flute closed, open to about 45 degrees, drop my right hand. I'm hitting the rail of my lathe. I'm hitting the rail of my lathe, okay? So I can't really make a big arc, but I'm doing my best, okay? So tip comes up, rotates open, and moves around down to the center in as much of an arc as I can give it, given the fact that I have a lathe bed in my way. Bowl turning lathes, professional bowl turning lathes, have just enough bed to get your tool rest on, and that's it. It's a vertical lathe with a tool rest so that you can stand right up next to it and move your gouge all over the place. This is got a bed so that you can do more than just turn bowls, but there are actually lathes that you just stand in front of so there's nothing in the way of your gouge so that you can get that motion for bowl turning. Commercial bowl lathes are interesting beasts, which, by the way, I've got to get some lumber, but I'm going to emulate one with my Delta. That'll be a whole video series on the Tube of You. If you don't already know, please go over to the red channel, the Tube of You. Link is, up in the thingy. And subscribe to my channel there. Now, I am losing mechanical advantage. At this point, the fulcrum is almost 3 inches from the cutting edge here. And you saw my gouge start to do this. I am losing mechanical advantage. At this point, I need to move my tool rest closer to the center so that I can maintain the most mechanical advantage possible here, where the bowl, because the wood that's the slow wood, the bowl has more torque here than it does out here. I need to move this in as close as I can so that I don't lose control and get a catch, okay? So here, because I'm cutting across, I can't cut down. I can't come back and cut down because the walls of the bowl are in the way. So I have to have this close here to maintain my mechanical advantage. But I also need to pay attention to what my depth is, because the bottom of the bowl needs to start getting flat. So I keep my continuous curve down to about here, down to about here. I keep my continuous curve, but then I've got to slope it off and flatten it out so that I have a nice bowl, okay? So, gouge fairly closed, elbows in, open to about 45 degrees, point it towards New York City. Drop my right hand so that comes up in an arc, and then raise that right hand slowly and bring it down to the center. Boop, just like that. And then we're going to take a look and gauge our depth real quickly. Now, I have a secret weapon that I'll show you that will help with the bottom of the bowl. You can do it with the Ellsworth grind because the Ellsworth grind is a 60-degree grind, but there's this great thing called the fingernail grind, or the English grind, or the bottom feeder if you're an American. And this is the traditional bowl gouge grind, hang on a second, that they have used for hundreds of years in England, and that is literally 60 degrees. You go straight into your sharpener and rotate the gouge so that you have exact 60 degrees all the way around. This is also called the bottom feeder, or this is a traditional bowl gouge. Fingernail design. Watch this. Fairly closed, open it up. Same motion, but you've got that almost flat 60 degree. So you can just ride that bevel all the way around and get a smooth, even cut. All the way across the bottom there. This is a great tool to have. Now, traditional English bowl turning uses this 60 degree on the inside and the outside. This is how it's been done for hundreds of years. us American rebels decided to start changing things and getting 40/40 grinds and Ellsworth grinds and doing all this experimentation and, you know, and it all works. There's no right way. There are different ways. There are other ways. But the point here is that we want to start getting rid of these tool marks. We can go deeper. We need to go a little bit deeper. So use the gouge that works for you to get you the clean slicing cut that leaves the least amount of sanding. But by the time you get to the center of the bottom of the bowl with the English grind, with that fingernail grind, you're almost perfectly vertical. You're just about wide open. Now, that's the, I guess, safe way or easy way to do it. Here's the thing. This is 60 degrees too. Okay? No, I zoomed in. The bowl is not bigger. This is 60 degrees too. That's a 60-degree angle here, right? So again, if we keep the minimum amount of surface area of the metal in contact with the wood by changing our rotation, we could get that same riding cut that we did with the bottom feeder with the Ellsworth. But it's a little more challenging because you have these wings that change the dimensions, they change your shape, okay? So this, using the Ellsworth grind to do the bottom feeding cuts, takes a little bit more concentration and a little bit more practice. I need to check the bottom of this, make sure I don't make a funnel. We're very close. Oh, we're one cut away. Okay? So if I'm going to ride that bevel, I have to be very careful that I keep that minimum width of metal, that absolute minimum surface area in contact with the wood, so that I don't let this is aggressive right here. Here is less aggressive in the middle, towards the middle, than out here on the edge, and I don't want to get that aggressive edge in there. So I have to be very, very conscious of tool control, where wrong gouge. Where here I'm at the exact same angle, exactly the same no matter which way this is oriented. It's exactly the same. Here I have that parabolic curve. It's not. So I have to be real careful, okay? Now, at this point, there are multiple techniques we can use to smooth this out. The standard technique, the accepted technique, the most used technique is just a good old-fashioned bowl scraper, just like that, okay? Yeah, it's a parabolic curve. It is a parabolic oval. So you just come in, you can tilt your scraper a little. You can get a shear scraper, but you just nice and easy drop the scraper below the little bump in the center and raise it up, and it takes that bump out, and you just nice and simple and easy. You do not have to use a negative rake scraper. You can use a negative rake scraper. You do not. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Some people swear by them. Some people swear at them. Okay. Hey, Jared, what's up, man? I need to come visit you, bro. You still at the same place? All right, but look, I took all those tool marks out. It's all gone. Okay. What is cutting? What is cutting with this scraper? This is just a big flat piece of wood. Yeah, it's a rough subject, brother. I'm working on it. I promise. I'm working on it. So this is a flat piece of metal. This is sharpened at 80 degrees. Okay, that is an 80-degree angle, but what is actually removing wood is the burr at the top of this here. So your scraper starts losing effectiveness as you lose this burr. There's a couple of ways to replace that burr. The simplest and easiest is a little diamond sharpening tool, just coming from down to up, working it around. You can raise that burr. You can go get on your grinder at 80 degrees and just and roll it and raise that burr. You can use a let's see. You can use a, that's not right. You can use a burnisher. This is a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, but it'll work. And just raise that burr, okay? But that burr, look. The burr, see how it's shaving skin off my finger? The burr is what does the cutting. That little, just like a card scraper, same thing. It's the burr that does the work. As long as you have a burr, the shape of your scraper doesn't really matter. And that goes for negative rake scrapers too. You're still using a burr. So we're just nice, light, easy. And I don't want to come out here because this is already misshaping because it's so thin. Okay? It's already misshaping. You can hear it. Hear it? And if I push that too much, as that's vibrating, I'll create a sympathetic vibration and it'll start to really go oval and this will catch and it'll snap the bowl. So you can actually angle this up like this and get a shear scrape. Raise the handle a little bit, drop the tip down. That gives you a little bit more shear. Okay? But again, we don't want to mess around up here. We'll ruin the bowl if we mess around out here. That'll go through the side because it's starting to misshape because it's so thin, the wood actually flexes. Okay? So at this point, we're finding more frass. Again, that's what comes out of the south-bound end of a northbound beetle or larva in the wood. So it's probably not the best idea to leave it. So we clean it out. But at this point, this is basically ready to sand, and we again can get away with 240. So we're going to start at 180. But with the exception of this little second right here, which we can fix real quick, and I'll show you something else that you can do. With scraping, if you have to get out here where it's going to misshape, right, you can use your hand. If you've got a good smooth surface, you can use your hand to steady it. If you don't feel comfortable using your hand, a piece of leather works. Or usually I will use 3M, the white 3M pad, which is a buffing pad. I don't have one. I'm out. I got to get some. But you can use a white 3M pad to steady it, and you can stabilize that to help reduce that vibration. But you get your hand out here, set your tool on the tool rest. Those are bug holes. Those are beetle holes. And frass is the byproduct of the larva eating the wood. So look how I've got this locked on my forearm. It's locked right here, right at my elbow. So the tool is solid with the direction of my arm. And again, I'm going to lock my body, but I've got to kind of lean over and move my whole shoulder. Try to show you here. I've got to lock that in, my forearm and lean. You need to see the physicality of this. Lock that into my arm, lean my whole body, take my left hand, steady the outside of the bowl, and very gently present the scraper to the wood. Very gently. If I ram it in there, it's going to crack and my left hand's going to get cut. Okay? You want to be very, very gentle here. Again, lock that in, kind of lock your shoulder, and very, very gently approach the wood and present that shaving burr to the wood, steadying it. And again, it's useful to have like the 3M, especially if you feel like you might hurt your hand, the 3M, or if you haven't finished sanded this, which you should always finish the outside of the bowl before you hollow the bowl. But if you haven't finished sanded it, that will prevent friction from hurting your hand. But this is the motion. I've created as much of a triangle as I can. Basically, this point, and this point, with a lock on my shoulder, keeping my shoulder as tight as I can, and really controlling this tip and the leverage with my forearm. Okay, so I'm just getting in there and creating as solid of a hold as I can. And I want to lift my elbow a little bit, drop the tip of that scraper down so that I present the burr in order to remove wood and smooth out those tool marks. Okay, I still have a little bit of a tool mark that, unless I really get aggressive, is not going to go away. I don't want to get aggressive because this is only 3/16 thick. So we're going to have to sand that, which is why we're going to start at 180 grit. However, what I do not have is any torn grain. And the whole point of this video is to teach you how to cut the wood and turn the bowl without tearing the grain. And we have achieved that. There is no torn grain in here. Okay? So we're going to sand it up real quick. Same thing as last time. We can do it in about 10 minutes. Always get your tool rest out of the way. And I prefer to kind of clean up the area a little of all these big chunks before I start sanding. I just like to clear this away just so that I know what I'm producing when I'm sanding, so that I can kind of gauge how much I'm removing. You don't have to. That's a personal preference. Again, we're using the Wood Turners Wonder Turbo Turners Inertia Sander. Slow the lathe down, about 400 RPM, 450. And the inertia of the wood turns the bearing on the sander. And you can see the oval. You can see that bowl has misshapen even though the wood is dry, simply because the grain goes across direction. And when you turn it that thin, you are going to get a slightly oval bowl. That's just natural. So the more time I spend at the lower grit, the less time I have to spend at the higher grits. So I want to make sure that I'm thorough at 180. And again, I will reverse directions. And I've just about got those tool marks. They're pretty much gone. Now, the other reason I reverse directions is to think about what grain of wood is, right? Wood is a bundle of fibers, right? It's a stack of straws. Now, if you look at the shape of the straws and you think about you're sanding it, and you're coming across one side, right? So you're going to flatten out this side of the straws, but you still got stuff going on the back side that didn't get touched. If I sand from both directions, I smooth both directions. That gives me a finer, smoother finish. So I reverse the lathe, sand the other side of those bumps, and I get a smoother finish. attention. Make sure we pay attention to the rim of the bowl. That needs to be smooth as can be. People are going to pick it up. They're going to handle it. If you have a sharp edge on that rim, it can cut you. Look for any problem areas. There's nothing in the rule book that says you can't take the pad and come in an individual area and pay it close attention specifically. But what you'll notice is there's no torn grain. There's very minimal marking. It looks really, really good. That is a clean surface. Another thing you can do if you have areas that you think need a little bit more work, nothing in the rule book that says you can't use a little power. Get in there. Okay, same thing. Turn the drill in the opposite direction of the way that the bowl is turning. So that, and let me show you why. Okay, so if I turn it the direction the bowl is turning, I'm sanding. Okay, but look at the amount of dust I'm raising. Now, if I turn it the other direction, opposite, I'm removing almost 3 times as much wood. See how much difference that makes? Turn your drill the opposite direction that the bowl is turning if you're going to use power sanding. Okay? Power sanding does save a lot of time. The difference, what I like, the reason I prefer most of the time to use the inertia sander over the power sander is that the batteries don't run out. This, I'd sand for about 15 or 20 minutes. I got to change batteries, and I only have 2 batteries. I need to buy new batteries, and I can fix that problem. But at the end of the day, the inertia sander doesn't cost me any extra power. But the inertia sander is a really wonderful tool. I am not sponsored by Wood Turners Wonders. I did ask them. They don't sponsor Turners, which is a shame because I sell their tool every time I break it out. But I'm not ashamed to tell you about American-made products that make our job as wood turners easier, regardless of if they'll sponsor me or not. If it's a good tool, I'm going to tell you. And that inertia sander is a darn good tool. Now, remember, we want to sand at the highest grit we can get away with, -1, right? If you're not getting the job done, go down a grit. If I'm not getting enough out of 180, if it's not doing what I want, there's no competition. It's not a matter of pride. There's no bragging rights. Go to 120. You can break out the 80 grit bowl gouge if you need to, if there's a problem in your bowl. Do what is necessary to sand it appropriately so that you have the nicest looking final product. If that means you need to step back a grit, you do. And where the bowl was flexing, I still have a little bit of issue. So I'm going to step back to 120 just so that I make sure I get that out of my bowl. Again, the goal is we don't see any of these little lines. Most people who aren't wood turners won't notice them. That bugs me. Okay? Yeah, this pad comes from, this mandrel comes from them. It's their stuff's great. And their sandpaper is bomb, because they are actually wood turners, and they designed sandpaper for wood turners. And this Green Wave sandpaper for them is backed with Mylar. It's designed for wood turning, and this sandpaper is amazing. It lasts forever. I have to make myself throw discs away. This is good stuff. That's their Green Wave sandpaper. So I'm stepping back to 120 because I have a little spot here that I'm not happy with. And I have a little spot here that I'm not happy with, and 180 isn't getting the job done. So I'll come in, specifically address it, tighten my drill. I'll get the drill turning, or get the lathe turning, I should say. And blend those specific spots that I was sanding. I unscrewed the mandrel. This is the only thing I don't like about their mandrels. they should put a little when they put these together, they should put a spotted Loctite on them. That's really not a big complaint. Woodturnerswonders.com. Woodturnerswonders.com. Yeah, they have purple. I've tried. I like the green wave better. I'm not a big fan of the purple. I prefer the green wave. I've tried multiples. All right, that got my spots out. I'm not gonna raise the grain yet. I'm gonna go back to 180. After I run at 180, I'll raise the grain before we go to 240. That got the problem spots though. So now I am using 180 to get the 120 sanding marks out. And from this point on, I'm no longer removing material. I'm no longer fixing problems. I'm simply sanding to remove bug. Those are bug holes. It's bug damage. It's why the tree died. A lot of people fill those. I like to embrace them. I think it gives the wood character. So at this point, all I'm doing with 180 grit is removing the 120 grit marks. Doesn't take much now, right? Moves faster. And that makes it a diet soup bowl. It'll only hold soup up to this height, so you lose weight because you can't eat as much. Okay, now I'm going to raise the grain. Again, I use alcohol. It evaporates 10 times faster than water, but it does the exact same thing. The end grain soaks it up, it expands, and then we sand it away, making a smoother finish. Yeah, I think it looks better. Now, if somebody wanted bowls that they could eat soup in, I'd fill the holes. But I think it looks a lot cooler. It tells a story about the wood. If you see the holes, you see the damage, you see what killed the tree. The tree came down because the bugs killed it. So with a little application of compressed air, that alcohol dissolves pretty quickly. That just evaporates pretty quickly. Right? And that's evaporated enough that I can step up to 240 grit, which is essentially, because there is still a little bit of liquid in there, still a little bit of wetness. Basically, it's like I'm wet sanding, which is going to give me a smoother finish. It's just a bowl. It's going to be a bowl. So again, drill turning the opposite direction of the lathe. Look at how much, whoo, right? That's a lot. Reverse, same reason, same thing. Drill turning the opposite direction. And at this point, I'm using 240 grit to remove the 180 grit marks. I only need about 2 or 3 passes down and back. That's it. This is starting to get incredibly smooth, okay? That's all it takes, because I did the work at the lower grit, and each successive grit, all I'm doing is removing the marks of the grit prior. I'm not trying to fix any more problem spots. I'm not trying to, remove any tool marks. They're gone. There's no tear out. All I'm doing is removing the it's just faster. I use both. I'm demonstrating that you can use the inertia sander or you can use a drill. It's just faster. I'll switch back to the inertia sander. But when I was doing touch-ups to some problem spots, the inertia sander doesn't turn on its own. I have to use the drill to get in a specific problem spot where the inertia sander works with the motion of the lathe. So we're going to step up to 320 for time's sake, because I'm already 16 minutes over. I'm going to go ahead and not going to worry about raising the grain. Another thing about this is you can see it's got built up because it was a little bit wet. You can blow it off and remove a little, but the magic is an eraser. This is just a rubber eraser. And that's another reason to use a drill. If you're reusing the sandpaper, which you can for a multiple period of time, just almost brand new. Okay? Almost brand new. How would I go about filling the holes? There are so many different methods. You can go the resin route, which is a big pain in the butt, but you can do it. You can do some two-part epoxy and wood shavings. You can use wood glue and wood shavings. You can use cyanoacrylate, CA glue, and wood shavings. You can use wood shavings from the bowl itself, or you can use a contrasting wood. I have some African blackwood shavings that make really cool fillers. How would you like to fill it? You can use Bondo. There are people who use Bondo. All right. What, 3 trips back and forth at 240 or 320? Reverse the lathe. Same thing. All we're doing is removing the 240 grit sanding marks. Probably the most common way is CA glue and wood shavings or sawdust. Okay? All I did there was remove the 240 with the 320. Last grit of paper that we're going to use is 400. For time's sake, we'll just blow it out, but it's better if you use alcohol and clean it. You're not raising the grain once you do it the first time and sand it back. All you're doing is using the alcohol to remove the prior grit. But once you've raised the grain, expanded that grain, and sanded it, it's gone. Okay. Forward. Reverse. Look how much that bowl has moved, how much the rim of that bowl has moved. That's just natural. I turned it 3/16 inch thick, and it has just, that is what wood does. I relieved all the pressure of all the bulk in that bowl, and it misformed. It kind of went a little bit football shaped just because I removed all that bulk out of the middle. Okay? That is natural. That's what wood does. Wood moves. Okay, that's it. I'm finished with sandpaper. Done. We'll go back to the Brad's Workbench. Sanding paste. Again, I am sponsored by Brad's Workbench, but I would tell you this is the best sanding paste that I've found on the market regardless. That's why I'm sponsored by Brad's. CA glue, cyanoacrylate. So this is Brad's Workbench sanding paste. It is a friable abrasive, meaning that the more you work it, the finer it gets. And I use Star Bond is one of my favorites, or Parfix, which is surgical grade. These are the brands of CA I use. This you can only get from specific dealers who have license for surgical grade. But I also keep that because if I cut myself in the shop, it doesn't hurt when you glue your cuts with it. So you take that paste, you work it in. You can feel it start to grab, which it's supposed to do. It's an abrasive. Then you take the wet part of your paper towel, lathe down to the lowest speed that you can on whatever belt you're on. On this one, it's 320. And you use the wet part of the paper towel and you just work it in. Make sure that you have an even coating, okay? Now you flip to a clean part of the paper towel, kick it up about 100 RPM. Make sure you get the whole surface. Okay, you can see I'm removing material. Flip to a clean part of the paper towel, kick it up 100 RPM. Rinse and repeat until the paper towel comes away clean. In general, with Brad's workbench, 1,000 RPM is where you're done. You're just burnishing at that point. Okay, still removing material. We're removing less material. Clean part of the paper towel, kick it up 100 RPM. Still removing material. Kick it up about 100 RPM. Now we're at about 1,000. Find a clean part of paper towel. Grab a clean paper towel. It's up to you. It's your shop. We're at about 1,000 RPM. We're pretty much done. Now, I'm not removing material, but because of the bug holes, I have a little bit of built up abrasive in there, abrasive paste. Just a splash of alcohol or a splash of mineral spirits. We'll lift that out, clean that up. Get that out of there. It's come through the other side too. That's normal. Just clean it up. Now, no tool marks, no torn grain, no 80 grit bowl gouge. You want to make better bowls? Learn to use your tools better. All right. So that's it. I'm not going to do the thanks, Martin. Appreciate it. Coming from you, that's a huge compliment. I very much appreciate it. I'm stopping here. What I will do is I'll probably make a video describing how techniques for removing the tenon and finishing the bottom of the bowl. But I've been going for 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's time for a break. Plus, I have to give baths to stinky doggies. Today is bath day. But this will be finished with Brad's Workbench Tongue Honey, which is a combination of pure tongue oil, beeswax, and carnauba wax, and can be applied off the lathe, so you don't have to have the lathe spinning to buff it or anything. Yeah, this is a great little snack bowl, popcorn bowl, key bowl. Throw your keys in it, catch all. You could set your cell phone in it, and the shape of the bowl will reflect sound and make it sound louder. There's all kinds of cool things you can do. So there you go. I will download this live and put it on my YouTube channel so you can refer to it again. If you want to learn how to turn a bowl with no tool marks, that's what we did today from start to finish. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you again soon.